AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after she blew up her own life and assumed I'd fix it for her. I'm a 34-year-old guy, married to my wife Lauren for 6 years. We bought our house 3 years ago after saving aggressively, budgeting like crazy, and doing basically nothing fun for a while to make it work. It's a modest 3-bedroom place. One is ours, one is a shared office, and one is a small guest room that doubles as storage. We don't have kids yet, but we've been planning to start trying this year. My sister, Christina, 28, has always been the type of person who believes things will work out without putting in real effort. She's charismatic and fun at parties, but impulsive and terrible with money. She's had at least 6 different jobs in the last 4 years because she either gets bored or butts heads with management. Our parents have bailed her out financially more times than I can count, to the point where they jokingly call her the boomerang child. 4 months ago, she moved in with a boyfriend she'd known for all of 7 weeks. She insisted he was the one and that they were soulmates. We tried to gently ask whether she thought it might be moving too fast, but she immediately got defensive and accused us of being jealous of her happiness. So we backed off and let her do her thing. Last month, everything came crashing down. Turns out the boyfriend wasn't the one, but was the one who pawned her laptop, stole her credit card, and left her stranded while he took her car on a 2-stage joyride. When she tried to get him arrested, it came out the car wasn't even in her name because she'd stopped paying the loan and the repo company had been looking for it. She came home sobbing and suddenly expected the whole family to snap into crisis mode with her at the center. Our parents refused to take her in because they recently downsized to a small condo for health reasons and barely have room for themselves. So Christina showed up at my house on a Tuesday evening with 3 garbage bags of clothes and announced, "I'm moving in until I figure things out." I froze. My wife Lauren stared at her like she'd just said she was moving in a live bear. I told Christina that we needed to talk first before anything happened. She got irritated but sat down. I explained calmly that our guest room was not a long-term living space, that we were planning to start trying for a baby soon, and that her history made us nervous about setting no boundaries. I said we could let her stay for 2 nights while she found a more stable solution, but that moving in indefinitely was an option. Christina blew up. She yelled that family is supposed to step up. She said it was disgusting that I could watch her go through something traumatic and say no. She called Lauren cold and controlling and accused her of turning me against my own sister. Then she stormed out, shouting that she'd remember how heartless we were when we needed her someday. 2 hours later, our mom called me crying. Christina had gone to their condo, told them I'd banned her from my house permanently, and refused to even let her sleep on the couch. I explained the actual situation, including the 2-night offer, but my mom said the damage was already done and that I should just be the bigger person and let her stay as long as she needs because she is nowhere else. When I asked where exactly she expected us to put Christina for months, my mom suggested converting our office or delaying having a baby until Christina got back on her feet. That suggestion sent Lauren over the edge. She got on the phone and, as politely as she could manage while shaking with anger, told my mom that delaying our family plans was not an option and that she was uncomfortable letting Christina move in after the disrespect she'd shown. For the next week, my phone blew up with messages from extended family. Half of them said I was heartless and abandoning my sister. The other half said Christina needed tough love because she'd never grow up otherwise. Meanwhile, Christina decided to retaliate by posting vague messages on social media about fake family and people who only love you when you're doing well. Several mutual friends reached out to me confused because they know I've always supported her. I didn't respond publicly, but it created unnecessary drama. The breaking point was when she showed up again unannounced, pounding on my door at 11 p.m., demanding to be let in because she was done dealing with everyone's bull. She was clearly stressed, but she wasn't in danger, just furious. Lauren didn't want to open the door because we didn't know how long she intended to stay or whether she'd refuse to leave. I stepped outside instead and repeated the same offer, 2 nights only, while we helped her look into shelters, shared rentals, or short-term sublets. She screamed that I was choosing my wife over my own sister. I told her honestly that I wasn't choosing anyone. I was choosing boundaries. She got in someone's car and left. Now the story floating around the family is that I'm abandoning Christina during the worst moment of her life and prioritizing my comfort over her basic survival. They claim I'm letting her become homeless out of pettiness. Christina has since found a friend's couch to crash on, but she's milking the victim narrative hard. I genuinely don't think I'm wrong for not letting her move indefinitely, especially when she has a track record of overstaying everywhere she goes, blowing up at people who set limits, and expecting others to clean up her messes. But part of me feels guilt because she really is struggling and she's still my sister, even if she's a nightmare sometimes. So, AITA for setting a hard boundary and refusing to let her move in, even though she's basically created a narrative that I abandoned her when she needed me most. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep creating more great content. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks so much for your support. AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house, even though she's going through a rough time and everyone says I'm being heartless. So I'm a 34-year-old guy who bought a house 2 years ago. It's not huge, but it's mine. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, and a half-finished basement. I keep telling myself I'll fix one day. The reason the house matters so much to me is because I grew up never having any stability. My mom moved us constantly after my parents' messy divorce, and by the time I was 18, I'd attended 9 different schools. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to create a stable, calm home, I would protect it. Enter my younger sister, Mia, who is 29. She's always been more chaotic than me, even as a kid. She means well, but she's impulsive and tends to blame everyone else when things fall apart. She's bounced between jobs, apartments, and relationships for most of her adult life. Whenever things blow up, she inevitably comes to the family and expects us to help her get back on her feet. About 2 months ago, her long-term boyfriend broke up with her. According to her, he blindsided her, but based on what he told our cousin, the relationship had been deteriorating for a long time, largely because Mia kept quitting jobs without discussing it with him and kept borrowing money from him that she never repaid. After the breakup, she had to move out, and since she hadn't been saving anything, she couldn't afford a new place. She couch surfed for about 2 weeks until she asked me if she could stay with me for a little bit. She said it would only be for a few weeks while she got a new job and regrouped. I hesitated, but I agreed with conditions. I told her she needed to keep the common areas clean, contribute to groceries, and actively job hunt. She said, of course, she understood, and at first, I genuinely believed she meant it. The first week was fine. She was a little messy, but nothing extreme. Then she started sleeping in later. Dishes piled in the sink. She grocery shopped once, and then claimed she didn't have money. I come home from work to find my living room full of her stuff. My quiet space became loud and messy, and every time I tried to talk to her, she'd say she was stressed and needed time. Then she started inviting friends over while I was at work, leaving food containers on the counter, and blasting music in the mornings, even though she knew I worked early shifts some days. She applied for maybe 2 jobs the entire month, and whenever I asked about it, she'd accuse me of judging her or acting superior because I had it together. After 6 weeks, twice as long as she promised, I told her she had to start making a plan. I wasn't kicking her out that day, but she needed to show she was taking things seriously. She got mad and said I was being controlling. A week later, I found out she'd adopted a cat. Not fostered, adopted, without asking me. She just showed up with it like it was no big deal. She said she'd always wanted a pet and needed emotional support. I told her absolutely not. She couldn't bring a cat here without discussing it. She said I was being dramatic and carried the cat into the guest room anyway. That night I snapped. I told her she was taking advantage of me, breaking all the boundaries we'd agreed on, and turning my home into a stressful environment. I reminded her that this house was the first stable place I'd ever had and that I didn't want to live with chaos again. She rolled her eyes and called me obsessive. I told her she needed to leave within 2 weeks. She burst into tears, called me heartless, and accused me of abandoning her when she needed me. She said she had nowhere else to go and that family is supposed to help, especially when someone is struggling. I told her I had been helping, but she wasn't respecting me or my home. She stormed out and went to my mom's house. Now my whole family is mad at me. Mom says Mia is fragile, and I should have been more patient. Our aunt says I'm lucky to have a house and should be willing to share. Even my grandmother, who usually avoids conflict, said it wouldn't kill me to let my sister stay a little longer. My friends, meanwhile, think I did the right thing and that Mia needs consequences or she'll never get her life together. They say I've given more than enough. But now the guilt is eating at me. My sister's always been the more emotional one. She does genuinely go through rough patches, and I know her breakup was devastating. I don't want her to feel abandoned, but I also don't want to sacrifice the peace I've worked years to build. I keep wondering if I could have handled things more delicately. Maybe I should have had a firmer conversation earlier. Maybe I should have given her more structure or more warnings. Maybe I should have been more patient, since she really doesn't have anywhere stable to go right now. But another part of me keeps replaying the sight of her friend sprawled in my living room while she slept until noon, or the feeling of walking into my own house and feeling like a guest, or the frustration of seeing that cat carrier and realizing she didn't think my boundaries mattered at all. She texted me yesterday saying she hoped I was happy and that she doesn't know how she's supposed to rebuild her life without support. My mom keeps telling me that Mia is depressed and not thinking clearly, and that I should let her come back until she's stable. But I don't feel like she'll ever become stable if no one ever holds her accountable. Still, I can't shake the feeling that I might have been too harsh, especially since she cried so hard and said she felt rejected by her own brother. So now I'm stuck wondering, am I protecting my peace or abandoning my sister when she needed me most? AITA? AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée redo their ruined engagement photos at my house, even though everyone says I'm being petty? A few months ago, my older brother Mark proposed to his fiancée, Jenna. The engagement itself was sweet and well-planned, and the only reason I know that is because Mark showed me the video afterward. I wasn't actually invited to the proposal, despite it happening at the Lakeshore Trail that I introduced them to years ago. I didn't say anything about that at the time because I've always taken the position that I don't need to be central to other people's big moments. That was until the photo situation began. I live in a small but picturesque house on the outskirts of town. My backyard is huge, with an old oak tree that blossoms like something out of a movie, a garden I've spent years cultivating, and a wooden swing I built with my dad before he passed away. People constantly ask if I've considered renting it out for events. I haven't, because it's my home and not a venue. Anyway, shortly after their engagement, Mark and Jenna asked if they could take their engagement photos in my backyard. I agreed instantly. I even moved some patio furniture around to create better backgrounds, cleaned up the garden path, and told them I'd step out for a few hours so they could have privacy. When I returned, the yard was an absolute wreck. Soil was kicked out of the planters. The swing chain had been wrapped around the branch so aggressively that the bark was damaged, and they had dragged my outdoor table across the grass, leaving deep tracks. I wasn't furious at first. Accidents happen. But what set me off was Jenna posting the photos online with a caption about how they had found this adorable old rustic yard behind a coffee shop to take their photos. She said nothing about it being my home. I didn't expect a public shout-out, but pretending it was something else entirely felt weirdly insulting, especially after the damage. I texted Mark privately, gently mentioning the state of the yard. He replied with, "Sorry, things got a little chaotic." Jenna had a lot of ideas. That was it. I spent 2 full days fixing the garden and replacing some of the plants. The damage to the tree branch is still visible. Fast forward to last month. They decided to do a reshoot because apparently Jenna wasn't happy with how the first set came out. She wanted a more soft, natural, romantic aesthetic. And for that, of course, they wanted my backyard again. This time I said no. I told them I didn't want to risk more damage and that I didn't feel comfortable hosting another shoot. Mark and Jenna did not take that well. Jenna jumped in with a long message about how I was ruining her vision and how, since we're family, I should be willing to help them with a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I reminded her that I had helped and that the result was a damaged garden, but she said she had no idea what I was talking about and that if things were broken, it must have already been like that. I sent her timestamps of the texts I had exchanged with Mark after the shoot. She left me on read. Then my mother called me. She said she'd heard about the misunderstanding and urged me to reconsider because Jenna was apparently devastated that her dream engagement album wouldn't match the theme she wanted. Mom said something along the lines of, "You know how brides get," which annoyed me because we're not talking about a wedding day meltdown. We're talking about people disrespecting my home. I told my mom that if Mark and Jenna genuinely apologized and offered to help repair the rest of the damage, or even just acknowledged it, I might think about it, but until then, the answer was no. Mom said I was being dramatic. Since then, other family members have chimed in. My aunt called to tell me I was acting cold. My cousin wrote me a paragraph about how I needed to learn to let things go. My younger sister, who rarely sides with me on anything, actually said I was right, but then added that I probably shouldn't dig my heels in too deep because it's not worth the drama. Yesterday, Mark showed up at my house unannounced. He tried to be casual about everything, acting like it was all a silly misunderstanding. He said he talked with Jenna and that she realized the garden wasn't in its best shape when they finished the shoot, but it wasn't intentional. He didn't apologize for dismissing me earlier, and he didn't mention the tree, the plants, or of the fact that they never offered to help repair anything. He basically just said, "Come on, it would mean a lot to us. We just need maybe 2 hours." I told him no, not maybe, not we'll see, just no. He got frustrated and said that I was making things harder than they needed to be and that he wished I cared more about his happiness. When he left, I could hear him muttering under his breath about how he couldn't believe this. Last night, Mom texted me again, saying that this is spiraling and that relationships are more important than a yard. She said Jenna is now worried that I don't like her, that I'm setting the tone for future family holidays. The part of me that hates conflict is tempted to cave. But the other part of me thinks, if I give in now, I'm basically telling them it's okay to disrespect my home as long as they ask for something afterward. And honestly, if they had just apologized right away or taken responsibility, I probably would have said yes this time. But they didn't. And now I'm being dragged as the villain. So, AITA for refusing to let them take more engagement photos in my backyard after they trashed it the first time and pretended they didn't. AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée wear my late mom's wedding dress, even though the entire family thinks I'm being cold and possessive. My mom passed away 5 years ago after a long illness. She and I were extremely close. I'm the oldest, and for most of my 20s, I was basically her caregiver when things got bad. My brother, Mark, is 4 years younger. He was away at college and then moved across the country for work shortly after. I don't resent him for that, but it meant I was the one who handled everything day to day. When Mom died, Dad gave me her wedding dress because I was the daughter and also because he said Mom had specifically told him I should keep it. She didn't leave a lot of sentimental items, so that dress became something I guarded carefully. It wasn't about the wedding aspect. It just felt like the last piece of her I could hold on to. Fast forward to last year. Mark got engaged to a woman named Sarah. I like her well enough, though we were never especially close. She's very bubbly, very extroverted, very focused on aesthetics and appearances. Nothing wrong with that, but sometimes she says things that make me feel like her whole world is an ongoing Instagram reel. When they announced their wedding, everyone was thrilled. I offered to help however they needed, but didn't expect to be pulled in much beyond being a bridesmaid. Then one evening, during a family dinner, Sarah dropped the bomb. She said she had been thinking about wedding dresses, but they were so expensive, and then she remembered I had Mom's dress. She said it would be so beautiful and meaningful if she could wear it, like Mom was symbolically welcoming her into the family. She didn't ask. She just said all this in a dreamy voice, like it was already decided. I froze. Dad looked shocked. My brother suddenly became very focused on his plate. I managed to answer politely that the dress was extremely sentimental to me and I wasn't comfortable with anyone else wearing it. I told her nicely that I knew she meant well, but the answer was no. She burst into tears. Real tears. She said she felt like I didn't see her as part of the family. She said it wasn't fair that I was hoarding something so meaningful when Mom would have wanted everyone to share her memory. Mark finally jumped in and said something like, "Come on, it's just a dress." Dad shut that down quickly, reminding him that Mom had specifically left it to me. But Sarah kept crying, and the dinner ended awkwardly. Over the next few weeks, the situation spiraled. Sarah reached out to me multiple times, messaging long paragraphs about how she felt rejected. She said she had envisioned herself walking down the aisle in that dress, how it would be like carrying a piece of mom with her. She said she thought of me as a sister, but my refusal made her feel unwanted. I told her again, as gently as possible, that my connection to the dress had nothing to do with her. It wasn't appropriate for her to wear it, and I wasn't changing my mind. Then Mark called. He accused me of being heartless and said I didn't understand how much this wedding meant to Sarah. I told him that I deeply respected that, but it still wasn't my responsibility to sacrifice something precious. I told him she could get a replica made if it mattered that much. He scoffed and said it wouldn't be the same. I said that wasn't my problem. Dad supported me, but my extended family did not. Word got around, and suddenly I was getting texts from aunts and cousins telling me I should share Mom's legacy. One cousin said I was being dramatic because people borrow dresses all the time. Another said I was basically telling Sarah that Mom wouldn't have loved her. I reminded them all that none of them had sat through Mom's chemo sessions, helped her shower, or held her hand at 3 a.m. when she was scared. They didn't see me break down when I packed her things. They didn't hear her say she wanted me to have that dress. It was one of the only things she ever explicitly passed down. Meanwhile, Sarah started posting vague things online about family members who hold on to pain instead of choosing love, which her friends commented on with heart emojis and emotional support. I didn't respond. I figured the less fuel I added, the better. The wedding planning continued, but there was this constant underlying tension. At Christmas, Sarah barely looked at me. Mark acted stiff and irritated. At one point, Sarah walked into the living room where I was sitting with my younger cousins and said loudly, "Some people don't understand the meaning of family traditions." Then she left. My cousins stared at me like I was supposed to defend myself, but I just stayed silent. 2 months before the wedding, Sarah came to my apartment unexpectedly. She cried again, but this time it felt more rehearsed. She said she wanted to give me one last chance to show I cared about the family. She said if I gave her the dress, she would have it professionally preserved and restored afterward, so I wouldn't lose anything. I told her no again. She asked if she could at least see the dress. I said no to that too. She left saying she didn't know how she could ever think of me as a sister. The wedding happened last weekend. I went because Dad asked me to, but the atmosphere was icy. Sarah wore a very expensive-looking designer gown. It was beautiful and suited her perfectly, but she refused to make eye contact with me all night. Mark barely said hello. After the wedding, I found out from a family friend that Sarah told several guests I had forbidden her from having a meaningful connection to Mom. Now people are messaging me again. Some say I did the right thing. Some say I'm a selfish person clinging to a dress when I could have helped create a beautiful moment. Some say I ruined my relationship with my future sister-in-law. And one person even said I was choosing grief over love. I don't think grief and love are mutually exclusive. I love my mom more than anything, and the dress is a symbol of that bond. It's not replaceable, and it's not a prop. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée wear my late mom's wedding dress and causing all this drama in the family. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée use my late wife's art studio as their wedding venue, even though it technically belongs to the whole family now. My wife passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer. It was the hardest period of my life, and even now, I still find myself reaching for her on the other side of the bed. She was an artist, the kind who made our entire neighborhood brighter with the murals she painted and the workshops she hosted for kids. When we bought our house, we renovated the detached garage into a full studio space for her. Skylights, custom shelving, big tables, and walls lined with her unfinished sketches, tools, half-done projects, and notes she scribbled to herself. After she died, I kept it exactly as it was. It became my quiet place. I go in there to think, to remember her, or sometimes just to sit and breathe when grief sneaks up on me. A year ago, I moved out of the house because the mortgage alone was too much. My parents convinced me to temporarily sign the property into a family trust while I figured things out, which was supposed to make refinancing easier. The idea was I still live there, I still pay the mortgage, I still maintain the place, but legally it's owned by the trust until paperwork gets sorted. I agreed because I trusted them, and honestly my brain was a mess at that time. My younger brother, Eric, got engaged 6 months ago to his fiancée, Claire. They're deep into the wedding planning bubble. Hashtags, mood boards, arguing about color napkins. I always stayed neutral and supportive. But a few months ago, they came to me with bright smiles and said they had the perfect idea for their wedding venue. They wanted to use the studio, not the backyard, not the house, the studio, the one space I still consider completely hers. They explained that the rustic wood tables and natural light would be perfect for their ceremony. They wanted to clear out the shelves, move the art supplies, cover the mural she was working on with drapery so it wouldn't clash with the aesthetic, and host about 50 people in there. They were excited like they had discovered some hidden gem, while I felt like my stomach dropped straight through the floor. I told them gently but firmly that the studio wasn't just a room. It was my wife's space. It's the last part of her life that still feels untouched. I said I wasn't comfortable with a wedding happening in there, especially one that would require removing or covering her things. I said they were welcome to use the backyard or any other part of the house, but the studio was off limits. They seemed disappointed, but didn't argue at the time. 2 weeks later, my parents called a family meeting. Apparently, Eric and Claire had gone to them insisting I was being unreasonable and selfish. My parents told me they understood I was grieving, but now that the property is in the trust, it technically belongs to everyone, and I could not claim exclusive rights to one room. They said weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events, and I should be willing to compromise, especially since Eric has always looked up to me and wants a meaningful family-oriented venue. I reminded them that I'm the one paying the mortgage, the taxes, the utilities, the upkeep. I'm the one living there. And more importantly, that the studio is filled with my wife's personal belongings and unfinished work. Clearing it out for a party would feel like erasing her all over again. My parents said I was being dramatic and that things are just things. They argued that using the studio could be a beautiful way to honor her memory, even though nothing about their plans reflected who she was or what she loved. Claire then texted me a long message saying she felt hurt that I valued the ghost of the past over supporting her and Eric's future. She added that she had already picked decor around the studio's lighting and that changing venues now would cost them money. She ended by saying she hoped I would reconsider for the sake of family unity. I didn't respond immediately because I was shaking. It felt like they were treating my grief as an inconvenience. When I finally messaged back, I said no again, and that this discussion needed to end. The studio was not a venue. It was not up for negotiation. Since then, my entire family has been cold to me. My mom said I'm holding the family hostage with my sadness. My dad told me I need to start moving on. Eric won't talk to me at all, but he keeps making vague posts online about toxic relatives who weaponize trauma. A couple of extended family members have reached out saying they heard I refused to let Eric use our shared property and that I should be ashamed. Meanwhile, I'm stuck wondering whether I'm so wrapped in grief that I can't see rationally. I know I signed the house into the trust, even if temporarily. I know it technically complicates things. I know weddings can be stressful and expensive. But every time I imagine my wife's studio packed with people eating, drinking, dancing, stepping around her things, covering up her mural because it doesn't match their theme, I feel physically sick. That place is sacred to me in a way I can't explain without sounding unhinged. My best friend says my family is exploiting the trust situation to bulldoze boundaries. My therapist says grief is not linear and that it's healthy to protect the spaces that matter. But my parents are still pressuring me, and Eric's wedding is getting closer. So here I am, genuinely unsure. AITA for refusing to let my brother use my late wife's studio for his wedding, even though it technically belongs to the whole family right now. AITA for kicking my brother and his fiancée out of my house after they rearranged my entire living room while I was at work. I'm a fairly easygoing person. I live alone, I work in IT, and I value two things, my routine and my personal space. I also have a brother, Mark, who values two things, being the center of attention and pretending every place he walks into is his. I love the guy, but he's exhausting. He's always been the sort of person who thinks he knows best, even when nobody asked. About a month ago, his fiancée, Tessa, got a job in my city. They planned to move here eventually, but her start date came sooner than expected, and their lease in their old city still had 2 months left. It made sense for her to stay with me temporarily. Then, because Mark didn't want to do long distance for a couple months, he decided he would stay with me too. I wasn't thrilled, but I liked Tessa and wanted to help out, so I agreed. I set 2 rules. Clean up after yourselves, and don't make big changes in the house without asking. They both said that was totally reasonable. And for 3 weeks, everything was fine. They bought groceries, kept the place tidy, even cooked for me a couple times. I started to think it wouldn't be as stressful as I feared. Then came the day I got home from a 10-hour shift to find my front door unlocked and my living room looking like a completely different house. Not tidied, not decorated, completely rearranged. My couch was on the opposite wall. My armchair was angled toward the patio instead of the TV. The TV was moved to a different corner, wedged between 2 bookshelves they had emptied and refilled in their preferred visual order. My rug had been rolled up, and in its place they had laid down a new bargain rug they had bought at some discount store because, in their words, it looked less depressing. My potted plants were scattered around like stage props. They even swapped out my curtains for some beige ones they thought were more neutral. At first, I thought maybe something had happened. A leak? A structural issue? Maybe they had to move things. But no, when they came in from the kitchen, they were smiling like they had just pulled off a surprise party. Tessa said, "We wanted to make the place more welcoming. It didn't feel very homey before." Mark added, "And we figure with us staying here, it should feel comfortable for everyone." I asked why they didn't ask first. They looked genuinely confused. Tessa said she thought I'd be grateful. Mark said I always overthink decor stuff, and they were just helping. I reminded them of the rule about big changes. Mark shrugged and said, "Well, it's not a big change if it's an improvement." I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry yet. Mostly stunned. I told them to please put everything back. Tessa immediately looked offended, and Mark straight up refused. He said it took them all afternoon, and they weren't going to undo progress just because I didn't like surprises. I tried explaining how it felt like they had taken over my house. Mark told me I was being dramatic. Tessa started tearing up, saying she was just trying to contribute. I said contributing doesn't mean overriding my entire living room. The argument kept spiraling. Eventually I said, calmly but firmly, "Put everything back the way it was tonight. I'm not asking. This is my home." Mark said, "If you're going to act like this, maybe we shouldn't stay here." I told him that was his choice, but the room needed to be restored. He stormed off to their guest room. Tessa followed. About an hour later, Mark came out and said they weren't moving anything, and if I wanted it done, I could do it myself. I said if they refused to respect my one boundary, they needed to find somewhere else to stay. He said I was choosing furniture over family. I said I was choosing respect over entitlement. Things escalated. He said I'd regret kicking them out. I told him to be out by the end of the next day. Tessa apologized, but said she wasn't going to leave without him. They packed up and went to stay with one of Mark's friends across town. Now my parents are furious with me. They said I embarrassed my brother, humiliated Tessa, and made a mountain out of a molehill. They said if the worst thing that happened was my living room getting a little reorganized, I should have let it go. I tried explaining just how extensive the changes were, but they dismissed it as me overreacting because I don't like change. Even some of my friends said they probably meant well, and I should have just changed it back myself if it upset me so much. But moving a couch and bookshelves and a TV stand and reorganizing all the books is not just anything, not to mention replacing my belongings with ones they purchased without asking. The thing that bothers me most is how little they cared that it was my home. They didn't ask. They didn't consider whether I'd like it. And when confronted, they refused to fix it. I keep thinking, if I let this slide, what would be next? Them reorganizing my bedroom because it's not efficient. Them deciding I should get rid of furniture they don't like. They already treated the place like theirs. I can't imagine what 2 whole months would have looked like. Mark still hasn't spoken to me except for a text saying, "You owe Tessa an apology." I haven't replied. So, Reddit strangers, AITA for kicking my brother and his fiancée out after they rearranged my whole living room without permission. AITA for refusing to host my sister's practice family in my home, even though it caused a massive blow-up in my entire extended family and apparently ruined her plans for the future. My sister, Lena, is one of those people who has been planning adulthood like it's a 5-year strategic mission. Growing up, she had binders labeled with things like my life at 25 and the first baby. She's incredibly organized, ambitious, and honestly, a little exhausting. I love her, but she can be intense in a way that makes everyone else feel like they're in one of her spreadsheets. I'm more laid back. I married my husband Tom at 30, we have a 3-year-old son, and we're doing fine. Not Pinterest perfect, not total chaos. Just normal. Lena has recently decided she wants to start having kids, but she's terrified of doing it wrong. Her solution? She announced that she was going to test drive parenting before actually becoming a parent. And I swear I'm not making this up. She called it a practice family program. Her plan was to live with a family for 3 to 6 months and take over some of their daily responsibilities so she could simulate the lifestyle and identify weak points. She pitched this like she was proposing a corporate pilot project. She said she wanted to handle school drop-offs, meal planning, bedtime routines, play dates, tantrum management, pediatric appointments, and emotional calibration. And she wanted to do it all while living in the family's home so she could get full immersion. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said she had narrowed down potential host families to 3, and, lucky me, I was her top choice. She said my home was the ideal environment because my son was age-appropriate for developmental observation. She also said my house was moderately tidy but not sterile, which apparently made it good for realistic immersion. It was the strangest combination of insulting and flattering I've ever experienced. She said she would move into our guest room, observe our routines, take over certain responsibilities, and learn hands-on. She promised she'd even optimize our processes while she was at it. She said it would be mutually beneficial. I told her absolutely not. Not because I don't want to help her, but because I don't want to live in a parenting simulation run by my own sister. I don't want someone taking notes while I struggle to get my kid into pajamas. I don't want process optimization in my marriage. I don't want a live-in trainee pretending my actual child is part of her strategic development plan. She immediately got defensive. She said I was sabotaging her future happiness. She said she needed real-world practice and that my refusal was selfish. She said she needed to make sure she'd be a good mom before she actually became one, and I was standing in the way. My husband overheard part of the conversation and burst out laughing, which did not help. Lena told him he was being dismissive of her goals. He told her that parenthood isn't a pilot program and that you can't treat a child like a corporate internship. She started crying and said she felt unsupported by her family. She stormed out and called our mom. Our mom called me asking why I was crushing Lena's confidence and mocking her desire to be prepared. Lena then told everyone she might not want kids anymore because she tried to be responsible and got punished for it. Then the extended family entered the group chat. Half of them think the idea is bizarre. The other half think I should have been nicer about it because parenting is scary and everyone copes differently. One aunt said, "At least she's not asking to borrow your car." Another uncle said he wished he had done a practice family before having twins. Some cousins found the whole thing hilarious and kept making jokes about internships and performance reviews. Then Lena sent a huge message saying that since no one was supporting her, she was going to find a different family on social media who appreciates structured preparation. And I'm worried she might actually try. The thing is, I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I just said no, firmly, because the idea is bananas. She keeps insisting that I rejected her out of spite or laziness. She told me I should want to help her because family is supposed to invest in each other's success. But here's the other part. She has always been extremely controlling. When she babysat years ago, she created color-coded feeding charts for a 6-month-old and insisted on nap schedules that the parents hadn't even wanted. She tries to run every environment like a meeting. I knew that if she moved in, she would try to take over our household. And I already struggle enough as a parent without being evaluated like I'm failing a performance metric. It's not that I don't appreciate that parenting is overwhelming. It's that kids aren't practice tools. And our home is not a training lab. And I honestly don't trust her not to start critiquing my parenting or trying to restructure my entire life. Now she won't talk to me at all. My mom keeps sighing dramatically on the phone. My dad thinks the whole thing is funny and told me Lena will get over it. But Lena is acting like I have betrayed her in some deep personal way. So here I am, wondering if the whole thing would have been easier if I had just let her come for a week, get bored, and leave. But I also know that once she got in the house, she'd be arranging our groceries alphabetically and timing my son's tantrums with a stopwatch. AITA for refusing to let my sister run a practice family program on us. AITA for refusing to let my sister and her fiancé use my house for their wedding after they made a small request that basically took over my entire life. So I'm a 32-year-old guy who owns a house that I worked extremely hard for. It isn't a mansion, but it has a big backyard, a nice deck, and enough space that hosting a family barbecue doesn't feel like a squeeze. My younger sister, 27, got engaged last year. Everyone was thrilled. Her fiancé seems like an okay guy. I assumed I'd be invited, maybe asked to help set up chairs, normal sibling stuff. What I did not expect was to become the unpaid wedding planner, decorator, caterer, and venue provider all at once. About 6 months ago, my sister called asking if she and her fiancé could hold their wedding in my backyard. I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't opposed. I figured it would be 40 to 50 people tops, simple ceremony, maybe a small tent. I asked what they had in mind. She said it would be intimate and extremely low maintenance. That was line number one. Within a month, I started getting messages from her future in-laws, her bridal party, and even guests I had never met asking me about logistics, parking, menu preferences, and whether I could fix up certain parts of my house to make the wedding more aesthetic. Apparently, my deck needed repainting to match the wedding palette. My lawn had to be reseeded. My fence needed to be replaced with something rustic but elegant. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a list compiled by her maid of honor and forwarded to me with a note. Shouldn't be too hard, right? I told my sister there was no way I was paying for renovations just so her wedding photos looked nicer. She said I was overreacting, that the list was just ideas, but every time I said no, someone else would message me insisting the wedding wouldn't look right unless I agreed. Then came the guest list. Remember when she said 40 to 50 people? Try 130. She told me it was fine because your yard is huge. It absolutely is not. People would have been practically sitting in my neighbor's flower beds. I pointed out the absurdity, and her fiancé tried to reassure me by explaining that they were planning to rent multiple tents, space heaters, a dance floor, and a full bar setup. They sent me a diagram showing all of this taking up 95% of my yard. Literally, the only open area left was a small path from my back door to the gate. Not to mention, they expected me to move my garden shed because it threw off the symmetry. Every time I pushed back, I became the villain. They said I was trying to ruin the most important day of their lives. They insisted a real venue would be expensive, and since I already owned the space, it made sense for me to share. The word share started to feel like a synonym for give us everything we want for free. Then it escalated again. My sister asked if they could start storing wedding supplies at my house. Not a box or two. She wanted to bring over crates of decorations, cases of wine, seating, linens, centerpieces, and what looked like half of an event rental store. They were renting a tiny apartment and didn't want the clutter. She suggested converting my garage for now. My garage, which I use daily. When I said absolutely not, she cried and accused me of not supporting her marriage. Her fiancé gave me a lecture on family unity. Her maid of honor texted me that I was sabotaging the vibe. But the final straw came when they casually told me they planned to have the bridal party get ready inside my house. Not just that, but they wanted to rearrange a few things so the photos looked better. The few things included taking down my living room shelves, removing my personal art, replacing my curtains with sheer white ones, and swapping my couch with some rental furniture. I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. I told her I was done. They could have the wedding somewhere else. I wasn't hosting. Period. She screamed at me over the phone. My mom called, furious, saying I had embarrassed the family and promised to host. I never promised anything except maybe letting 50 people stand in my yard for 20 minutes while vows were exchanged. My sister's future in-laws messaged me a long paragraph about how hurtful I was being. Her fiancé told me I was making this personal, which I found hilarious because they made this extremely personal the moment they tried to redecorate my entire house. The fallout has been dramatic. My sister has blocked me on everything. My mom has given me the cold shoulder. The wedding is now booked at an actual venue, which apparently set them back a lot more than they wanted to spend, and they're blaming me for that cost. My dad is staying neutral, but did ask if I could have been more flexible. I told him flexibility isn't the same as letting people bulldoze you. Now part of me feels guilty. It would have been one day. Family is important. But the sheer entitlement, the constant demands, and the expectation that I would completely change my property and lifestyle for their event still makes my blood boil. AITA for refusing to let them use my house after all of their requests. Hey friends, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely want to know what you enjoy and what we can improve. What did you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future uploads? Your feedback helps us get better every day. Thanks for sticking with us. AITA for kicking my brother and his fiancée out of my house after they tried to test my future parenting skills by sabotaging my belongings. My husband and I have been trying to conceive for a little over a year, and while we're not pregnant yet, we've been slowly turning one of our spare rooms into a nursery. Nothing fully decorated, just assembling furniture and putting away things we bought over time. It's been a positive project for both of us, something hopeful that keeps us sane when treatments and doctor visits wear us out. My younger brother, Eric, is getting married soon to his fiancée, Melissa. They're both loud, opinionated, and convinced they know more about everything than everyone else. They love to brag about how ready they are to be parents someday soon, because they've read tons of parenting books. They don't have kids, nor do they interact much with kids, but that hasn't stopped them from giving unsolicited lectures. A few weeks ago, they asked to stay with us for 3 nights because their apartment was undergoing emergency plumbing work. We agreed, with the clear boundary that the upstairs rooms, nursery and office, were off limits. I work from home and keep sensitive documents in my office, and the nursery is obviously emotional territory for us. They agreed. That lasted less than 24 hours. On the first night, I went up to grab something from my office and found the door slightly ajar. Inside, Eric and Melissa were going through one of my desk drawers. When I asked what they were doing, they gave some awkward excuse about looking for tape. I told them the kitchen drawer had tape and reminded them the office was off limits. They acted embarrassed, but brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. Strike one. The next day was when things got weird. We left them alone for a few hours while we ran errands. When we came back, they were sitting on the couch, looking weirdly proud of themselves. Melissa announced they had done us a favor, and we shouldn't freak out. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. They had gone into the nursery. Not just gone in. They had moved things, unboxed items, rearranged furniture, opened sealed baby supplies we'd been saving, and ripped tags off clothes we weren't ready to wash yet. I asked them what on earth they were thinking. Melissa said they were helping us see what real parents deal with and claimed we were too uptight because babies create chaos, so better to get used to not having everything perfect. Eric backed her up, telling us we needed to relax if we ever wanted to be good parents. I told them plainly they had crossed a huge boundary. My husband was visibly upset because some of the items they opened were expensive and meant for later stages. They both rolled their eyes like we were ridiculous. Then Melissa dropped the bomb. She said she had intentionally hidden several nursery items around the house to test our resourcefulness. She said she read that good parents need to adapt when things go missing, so she wanted to see how we'd handle it. I just stared at her. I genuinely couldn't process the audacity. When I asked where the items were, she refused to tell us. She said we'd find them eventually and that it was part of the exercise. My husband asked her if she realized some baby supplies have expiration dates or need sterile storage. She shrugged and said, "Well, that's part of the challenge." At that point, I told them they needed to pack their things and leave immediately. They were shocked. Eric kept saying we were overreacting. Melissa got defensive and said she was trying to help and that we weren't ready to be parents if we couldn't handle a little test. I repeated that they needed to get out. They argued, but we stood firm. Eventually they left, but not before Melissa muttered that if we ever did have a baby, she hoped the kid inherited more chill than we had. It took us 2 days to find everything they hid. Some things were in kitchen cabinets, some under couch cushions, some in the laundry hamper, and one in the trunk of my own car. A container of baby formula was left half open in a bathroom drawer. Several items were damaged. When my parents found out, they were furious at me. They said I humiliated Eric and Melissa by throwing them out and should have handled it privately. My mom claims Melissa was just trying to bond, and I should be more understanding of her quirky personality. My dad said we made a big deal over a couple baby trinkets and suggested I apologize so the wedding isn't awkward. I told them I'm not apologizing for someone intentionally sabotaging my belongings and violating clearly stated boundaries, especially when it's tied to something as emotionally loaded as our fertility struggles. Mom said that was an overdramatic way to frame it. Eric has since texted me, saying he and Melissa won't speak to us until I apologize. I haven't responded. My husband says we did the right thing, but I'm exhausted from the family drama and starting to wonder if I truly overreacted. I keep replaying that moment when they proudly admitted they had tested us as if we were contestants on some twisted game show instead of two people trying to build a future family. AITA for kicking them out? AITA for refusing to host my sister's entire wedding at my house after I accidentally became the family favorite venue? I, 37F, live on a similar property about 40 minutes outside the city. Years ago, after a messy divorce, I bought this place because I needed quiet space and projects to keep my mind occupied. The property has a big restored barn, a pond, a meadow, and a lot of tall trees. It looks like something out of a lifestyle magazine, but only because I poured years of sweat into it. I built flower beds, repaired fencing, cleared brush, and refinished the barn interior by hand. It's my sanctuary. Last year, my cousin asked if she could hold her engagement photos on my property. I said sure. The photographer posted some of the pictures online, and people loved them. Suddenly, every relative seemed to have an event idea that would be perfect for my place. I allowed a few small things: a cousin's baby shower, a family barbecue, a surprise anniversary party for my uncle. I enjoy hosting occasional gatherings, but I set boundaries. Small groups, no overnight stays, nothing that costs me money, and no messing with the barn interior. Then my younger sister, Emma, 31F, got engaged. She lives in another state, but visits a lot. She's always been the golden child, not maliciously, just adored. My parents dote on her. Growing up, she never heard no. I love her, but she expects people to bend around her life. At Christmas, Emma announced she wanted a rustic chic outdoor wedding and that she had already chosen my property as the perfect venue. Everyone applauded. I sat there confused because no one had asked me. After dinner, she pulled me aside and said she wanted the ceremony by the pond, cocktail hour in a meadow, dinner in the barn, and dancing under string lights. She had a whole Pinterest board. I told her I needed time to think. I spent weeks trying to imagine the logistics: 150 guests, rentals, catering trucks, portable bathrooms, liability insurance, parking, noise complaints, impact on the property I maintain alone. Even the barn has limitations. It's sturdy, but not built for big crowds. Plus, I work full-time. Preparing the place would mean sacrificing months of weekends and money I didn't have. I told her gently that I couldn't host something that big. I offered alternatives. She could do engagement photos here, or a small rehearsal dinner, or a bridal shower, but not the entire wedding. She cried. Then my parents called me, saying I had broken her heart and ruined her dream. My mother insisted that hosting the wedding would be a simple gesture of sisterly love, because I wasn't using the barn for anything important. I reminded her I bought this property for peace, not for it to become the family event center. Emma called me herself and said she'd cut down the guest list a little, maybe to 120. She also expected the ceremony rehearsal, all decorations, and prep to happen the entire week before the wedding, meaning people would be in and out constantly. When I held firm, she accused me of being selfish and jealous. That stung, because I'm truly happy for her. Things escalated when my father said they had already told extended family the wedding would be at my place. Apparently, Emma sent out, save the date, cards with my address printed on them. I couldn't believe it. She had done this before I even gave an answer. I told her she needed to send out corrected information immediately. She refused, saying it would be embarrassing and people would think something was wrong with her relationship. I said that wasn't my problem. She said if I weren't so dramatic, none of this would be happening. The next part still blows my mind. My parents drove to my house unannounced to talk sense into me. They walked around, pointing at areas and saying things like the caterers can set up here, parking can go there, we'll need to cut a path through these trees. As if the decision was already made. When I repeated no, my mother burst into tears and my father got angry, saying I was humiliating the family and punishing Emma. I told them to leave. Now half my family is furious. A few relatives privately told me they get it, but most say I'm being dramatic, that it's one day, and that I should be honored they want to celebrate here. Emma posted a vague message online about being let down by those who should love you, which my parents liked. She hasn't spoken to me since. The worst part? I feel guilty, even though I know logically I shouldn't. It's not that I don't want her to have a beautiful wedding. It's that I never agreed to be a full-scale wedding venue. The stress, the cost, the weeks of disruption, the expectation that I'd coordinate everything myself. It's too much. Friends outside the family say I'm absolutely in the right. But my family's reaction has been so extreme that I'm second-guessing myself. Did I overreact? Should I have compromised more? Am I really being selfish for not allowing my sister to use my home for a massive wedding I never agreed to? So, AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house, even though the rest of my family thinks I owe it to her? AITA for refusing to host Thanksgiving after my entire family decided my house was the default holiday venue, even though no one ever asked me? So I'm a 34-year-old woman who bought my first home 2 years ago. It's not huge, but it's the first place in the family that isn't a cramped apartment or rental. It has a decent-sized living room and a backyard, and when I first moved in, everyone made a big deal about how perfect it would be for family gatherings. I laughed it off at the time because I thought they were just admiring the house. I didn't realize they were actually planning my future for me. Last year, I volunteered to host Thanksgiving because I was excited to show off the place. I decorated, cooked almost everything, bought folding tables, replaced my tiny dining set with a bigger one, and basically treated it as a big milestone moment. Everyone said it was lovely. My parents bragged that I was the new hub of the family. My sister joked that she was glad she never had to host anything again. I thought it was just a joke. Apparently, it wasn't. Fast forward to this year. Around mid-October, I texted my mom asking what the plan was for Thanksgiving. All she said was same as last year, right? I asked what she meant, and she replied, "At your house, of course. You did such a great job." I said I had an offer to host this year and would actually prefer not to because work has been ridiculously stressful. I manage a small team at my job, and we've recently taken on new clients that doubled our workload. I've been doing 50 to 55-hour weeks. I told her all of this. She brushed it off, literally responded with, "Oh, sweetie, everyone is busy. You'll be fine. We'll all pitch in." I said no, clearly, directly, firmly. Then my sister jumped in with a group text. "Wait, what do you mean you're not hosting? Mom already bought ingredients for the dish you made last year. We already told the kids they were going to Aunt Elle's house again." I repeated that I wasn't hosting and that they needed to figure out an alternative plan. My mom suggested her place, but immediately started listing reasons it wouldn't work. Her oven is too small, the dining table seats only 6, the driveway won't fit all the cars. My brother suggested a restaurant, but my mom hates eating out on holidays because she thinks it feels empty. My sister said she could do it, but she and her husband have 2 giant dogs that jump on everyone, and she didn't want to deal with that kind of chaos. Throughout this whole conversation, I kept saying the same thing. I am not hosting. A week later, my dad called me and asked why I was making things difficult. I told him I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just needed 1 year off. He sighed like I was being unreasonable and said I should have spoken up earlier. Except, I did. No one asked me. They just assumed. The situation escalated when I got home last Tuesday to find 2 of my aunts and a cousin on my driveway. They had come to help me get set up because they figured if I saw how much support I had, I would stop being stubborn. They brought containers of decor, grocery bags, and a freaking folding table. I didn't let them inside. I told them I'd already said no and that showing up uninvited to pressure me was not helping. My aunt told me I was being dramatic. I told her they needed to leave, and after some back and forth, they finally did. That night, my mom texted me saying she was deeply disappointed in how I treated family who was only trying to help. 2 days later, I found out through my cousin, the only one who actually seems to get my side, that my family had decided to host Thanksgiving at my house anyway. I wasn't supposed to know. They were planning to show up Thursday morning with food and give me a break by cooking themselves using my kitchen. My mom apparently said something like, she'll get over it once she sees everyone together. I was furious. I told my cousin to warn everyone that if they showed up at my house on Thanksgiving, the door would be locked and I would not let anyone in. I wasn't bluffing. Thanksgiving morning, I packed a small overnight bag and drove to a nearby state park cabin I had rented last minute. It didn't have TV or Wi-Fi, but it had peace and quiet. Before I left, I locked my gates and put up a note on the door that said, I told you I was not hosting. Do not let yourselves in. My phone blew up around noon. My sister texted first. What is wrong with you? Then my mom. We're standing outside like idiots. How could you embarrass us like this? My dad left me a voicemail that sounded more sad than angry, saying he didn't recognize the person I was becoming. I didn't respond to any of it until the next day because I wanted one day where I didn't feel guilty or pressured. When I finally replied, I said that everyone had disrespected my boundaries repeatedly and that ignoring my no was not loving or supportive. I explained that I wasn't their event venue. My mom said I owed everyone an apology for ruining the family holiday. I said I wasn't apologizing. Since then, half the family keeps texting me to say I overreacted. The other half are somewhere between silent and vaguely supportive, but afraid to say it publicly. My sister insists the kids were devastated, which made me feel guilty, but I also don't think it's fair to emotionally manipulate me with that. Now my parents are demanding a family meeting to talk about holiday expectations, but I'm honestly exhausted and don't want to go unless someone acknowledges that what they did was messed up. So, AITA for refusing to host and leaving town so that my family wouldn't steamroll my decision. AITA for refusing to let my younger sister bring her kids to my wedding after she tried to manipulate me. So I, 32F, am getting married in a few months, and the planning has been, honestly, more stressful than I anticipated. My fiancé, 34M, and I have been together for 8 years, and we finally decided to tie the knot. We are both extremely close to our families, and I have always envisioned a wedding that feels intimate and meaningful, with the people who really matter most in our lives. My younger sister, Lisa, 27F, has 3 kids under the age of 8, and that's where the problem started. When we started drafting our guest list, we made it very clear that we were aiming for a small, adult-oriented ceremony. We love kids, but our venue is quite limited in space, and our wedding is going to be a more formal affair where we know having toddlers running around would not work well. My parents understood, my fiancé's family understood, and the only person who has had issues is Lisa. When I told Lisa about our guest list plan, she got visibly upset. She immediately said, "You can't have a wedding without my kids. It's not fair to them. They're part of the family too." I tried to explain that it's not a matter of fairness but logistics and atmosphere, but she wouldn't hear it. She started bringing up all sorts of points. How she spends so much time supporting me, how her kids are well-behaved, how she can get a babysitter but still wants them there because she can't bear to miss this milestone with them. I tried to compromise at first. I offered to host a separate kid-friendly brunch the next day for her family and any other relatives who might want to bring children. I even suggested she could film parts of the wedding so the kids could feel included. But none of that seemed to satisfy her. She said that she wasn't asking for an alternative. She wanted her kids there and that I was being selfish. Then things escalated. She started sending messages to my fiancé, which I found really inappropriate, essentially trying to guilt him into convincing me to allow her children at the wedding. When I confronted her about this, She said I was overreacting and that I should be more family-oriented. At this point, I realized she wasn't going to back down and that any further attempts at compromise would only give her more leverage to manipulate the situation. So I made the decision to stick to our original plan. I wrote her a firm but polite message explaining that my wedding is an adult event, that there is no space for additional children, and that we hope she can still attend with her husband. I emphasized that this wasn't a reflection on her kids personally, but a boundary for the kind of wedding we are hosting. Her response was dramatic, as I feared. She accused me of trying to erase her family and said she didn't think she could attend a wedding that excluded her children. She also started posting subtle digs on social media, tagging me in photos with her kids and saying things like, excited to celebrate family milestones, even if some families can't include everyone. Now my parents are subtly pressuring me, suggesting that maybe I should rethink my stance so Lisa doesn't feel hurt. My fiancé supports me entirely, but the tension with my sister has been emotionally exhausting. My friends are mostly supportive, saying I need to stand my ground, but some have mentioned that maybe I'm being too rigid or that I could find a way to include the kids without disrupting the wedding. Here's the tricky part. I feel torn because, on one hand, I'm trying to host the wedding I've always dreamed of, and on the other hand, I don't want to cause a rift with my sister. I honestly do not want her to miss the wedding, but I also do not want to compromise the type of event we are planning. Every time I bring up the idea of having the kids there, it just turns into a guilt trip or negotiation tactic that I know will never satisfy her. I guess my main concern is whether I'm being an asshole for putting my boundaries above her feelings. I have offered alternatives. I have been clear and polite, and yet she continues to act as though I am deliberately trying to hurt her. I know kids are important, and I love my niece and nephews, but my wedding feels like the one event that should reflect the adults I want around me and the atmosphere I envisioned. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to allow my sister's kids at my wedding, even though she's upset and my parents think I should reconsider. Character count, 6 for 85 if you want. I can also write a longer version closer to 7,000 characters, adding more family drama, past history with your sister, and emotional stakes to make it read even more like a viral AITA story. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his fiancée? I, 28F, have always been really close with my younger brother, Ben, 25M. We grew up in a fairly small town, and for most of our lives, we were basically inseparable. Our parents divorced when I was 16, and I ended up being more of a support system for him than anything else. Over the years, he's leaned on me for pretty much everything: school, work advice, personal life stuff. We've always had a good relationship, and I honestly considered him my best friend. About 2 years ago, Ben met his fiancée, Sarah, 27F, and initially, I was cautiously optimistic. I've met people he's dated before, and it's always been a roller coaster, but Sarah seemed nice enough in the beginning. She was charming, polite, and seemed genuinely interested in him. I thought, maybe this will work out. However, as time went on, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Sarah began to be incredibly dismissive of my relationship with Ben. She would make small comments like, Ben is an adult now, he doesn't need a big sister interfering, or you're too intense about family stuff. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just normal jealousy or her way of setting boundaries. But it got worse. She began excluding me from plans that included Ben, even ones I was clearly part of growing up. For instance, she planned a weekend trip for Ben and some of his friends, and when I casually mentioned I'd love to join since I was helping organize part of it, she flat out told me, "This is just for the guys. You wouldn't have fun." Ben didn't push back, and while I tried to brush it off, I felt hurt. Then it really escalated. My parents hosted Thanksgiving last year, and I invited Ben to join with Sarah. Sarah immediately started criticizing everything, from a menu to the decorations. She even made a point to loudly comment that she didn't get why we always do things the old-fashioned way, and that my parents' house was so cluttered. I tried to laugh it off, but my parents were obviously uncomfortable, and Ben just kept apologizing to Sarah instead of defending our family traditions. The last straw happened when Ben proposed to her 6 months ago. She was very clear about wanting a small, intimate wedding with only a few close friends and family. Fine, I thought I can respect that. But then she sent out the guest list, and I noticed she had omitted my name entirely, despite Ben insisting he wanted me there. I brought it up, and the conversation went horribly. Sarah told me, "You're not really a part of our life now, and honestly, I don't think you'd enjoy the wedding anyway. It's really about us, not family obligations." I was shocked and hurt, especially since Ben had been so supportive of me in the past. I tried to reason with him privately, explaining that I felt like Sarah was actively trying to exclude me and that I didn't feel comfortable attending under these circumstances. Ben told me I was being dramatic and that Sarah was just setting boundaries, and that if I truly loved him, I would attend anyway. I spent weeks debating what to do. On one hand, I really wanted to be there for my brother. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that attending would mean validating Sarah's behavior toward me. I finally decided to send Ben a message saying I couldn't attend the wedding. I explained that it broke my heart, but I didn't feel welcome or respected, and I couldn't be part of a day where I would be deliberately sidelined. The fallout has been intense. Ben hasn't spoken to me much since, except to send a few curt texts accusing me of ruining his happiness and choosing drama over family. My parents are divided. My dad says I'm being too sensitive and should just show up for your brother. But my mom fully supports my decision, saying that Sarah's behavior has been exclusionary and toxic. Some extended family members have reached out, saying I'm overreacting and that family disputes are part of life. I get that, but this feels different. It's not just a minor disagreement. It feels like a conscious effort to make me feel like I don't belong. I've tried explaining my perspective, but everyone keeps framing it as me being the villain. I am genuinely torn. I love my brother, but I also know I have a limit when it comes to being treated poorly. I feel like if I attend, it will damage my self-respect, and I'll resent him for letting it happen. I've thought about trying to mend things with Sarah, but I can't help feeling like she's made it very clear that she doesn't want me in her life. So here I am, stuck in this mess. I'm worried that by not attending, I'm pushing my brother away forever, but I also know that attending would make me miserable and compromise my boundaries. I just can't see a way to make everyone happy here, and I keep wondering if I'm the one being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his fiancée? AITA for ruining my sister's wedding because I refused to lie? This is going to be a long one, so I'm going to try to keep it organized. I, 29F, have a younger sister, Sarah, 27F, and I've always been known as the honest one in my family. That honesty has sometimes been a source of tension, but I've always been proud of it. My sister, on the other hand, has always had a knack for charm and people-pleasing, and while I love her dearly, it sometimes crosses into manipulative territory. A few months ago, Sarah got engaged to her fiancé, Jake, 30M. They've been together for about 3 years, and I'll admit, I've had my reservations about him. Not about his character necessarily, but I just didn't feel that spark of closeness in our interactions. He seemed distant and sometimes dismissive, which I thought could be because of social awkwardness, but as time went on, small things started to add up. Anyway, fast forward to planning the wedding. Sarah wanted me to be one of her bridesmaids, which I happily agreed to. We talked a lot about the details, including the guest list, and I noticed she wanted me to personally invite some of my old friends who I hadn't spoken to in years. That was fine, though a little awkward. The first major incident happened when she asked me to lie about something. She had invited her college roommate, Emily, who has a history of passive aggressiveness and spreading rumors. Sarah asked me to cover for her if Emily asked about a sensitive topic. Emily had asked if Sarah was pregnant because Sarah had mentioned she was worried she was late on her period months ago. Sarah was adamant that I should just tell Emily, "Oh yeah, she's pregnant," even though she absolutely wasn't. I told her I was not comfortable lying and that if Emily asked, I would answer truthfully. Sarah rolled her eyes, but eventually let it go. I thought that was the worst of it. Then came the wedding week. I had arrived a few days early to help us set up, and I noticed some tension between Sarah and Jake that I didn't initially think was my business. On the day before the wedding, Sarah pulled me aside and said she needed my help with a bigger issue. Apparently, one of her distant relatives, Uncle Tom, had a habit of getting drunk and making inappropriate jokes. Sarah was worried he might say something that could ruin the perfect image she wanted for her wedding. She asked me to somehow get him to behave or to lie if he caused a scene. I told her I could try to steer conversations or distract him, but I absolutely wouldn't lie. She seemed annoyed but agreed. Now, here's where it really escalates. The morning of the wedding, I was helping with decorations and noticed Emily hovering near Sarah, looking for gossip opportunities. Sarah asked me again to lie to Emily if she asked any personal questions. I politely refused, reiterating that I didn't want to get involved in dishonesty. Sarah was frustrated, but moved on. The ceremony itself went off without a hitch, and honestly, it was beautiful. The problem came during the reception. Uncle Tom had indeed had a few drinks and made some crude jokes about marriage. Everyone laughed nervously, and Sarah tried to shush him, but it didn't stop. At some point, he started talking about how Sarah had been on again, off again with Jake before they got serious. Sarah started to panic and whispered to me to handle it. I told him politely but firmly that it wasn't appropriate to discuss and tried to redirect him to another topic. He didn't listen, and Sarah kept looking at me, clearly expecting me to lie and diffuse the situation by saying something untrue about her past. I refused. I told her in front of him, "I'm not going to lie about this. People can know what they know." She was furious and stormed off to cry in the bridal suite. Emily overheard part of the conversation and immediately started whispering to other guests. By the end of the night, the rumor mill was in full swing, and Sarah blamed me for ruining everything because I didn't just cover for her. She said she couldn't believe I wouldn't do a small favor to save her big day. The next day, she sent me a long text saying I had been selfish, that I had embarrassed her in front of her friends and family, and that I had caused unnecessary drama. I tried to explain that lying is not something I'm comfortable doing, and that if anyone was upset, it was really Uncle Tom's fault for being inappropriate. She didn't respond to that part, just kept repeating that I had ruined the wedding. I've spoken to a few family members, and opinions are split. Some say I was right to stand by my principles, while others think I should have just told a small lie to make her happy. Sarah has not spoken to me directly since the wedding, except for a few angry texts. I feel like I was being honest and protecting myself from being put in a morally compromising position. I love my sister, and I wanted her day to be special, but I also feel like asking me to lie, especially in front of guests, was unfair. I keep replaying the day in my head, wondering if I should have just gone along, but I really feel like I would have regretted that forever. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to lie for my sister and ruining her wedding. Character count, 6,423. Would you like me to craft another story in the same style, but with a different twist, maybe involving roommates or work instead of family? AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. This is going to be long, so bear with me. I, 33F, have a younger sister, Emily, 28F, and she recently got engaged to a guy named Kyle, 30M. For context, our family is reasonably close-knit, though we do have our fair share of disagreements, mostly because of Emily's tendency to be dramatic and Kyle's very abrasive personality. Emily and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, I was the responsible older sibling, and she was the free spirit. I went to college, started my career, and basically supported myself from a young age. Emily, on the other hand, took a few detours in life, switching majors multiple times, working odd jobs, and moving back in with our parents more than once. I've tried to be supportive, but it's always been a bit of a balancing act. Anyway, about 6 months ago, Emily announced her engagement to Kyle. I had met him a handful of times before, but I didn't really know him well. On paper, he seemed fine. He had a stable job, wasn't completely irresponsible, but there were red flags that I noticed almost immediately. He is extremely controlling, has a temper that flares up over minor things, and has a very dismissive attitude toward anyone he considers less important than him. For example, the first time we had dinner at my place, he loudly criticized my cooking, even though I had made him a dish I knew he liked, and then rolled his eyes when I politely asked him not to talk over everyone else. Now, Emily and I have had many fights in the past, but we have an understanding that for family events, we try to put our differences aside. When she started planning the wedding, She asked me if I would like to contribute financially. I said yes, but I made it clear that I wouldn't cover the entire wedding and that I expected it to be a collaborative effort between the couple, the families, and myself. She initially agreed. As the planning went on, things started to get weird. Kyle began making requests that seemed completely unreasonable. He wanted the wedding to be at an extremely expensive venue, insisted on a live band he personally liked, which was way over budget, and demanded a lot of luxury items that Emily and I found unnecessary. I tried to discuss compromises with Emily, but she would always side with him, claiming that it's his wedding too, and he's just passionate about his vision. The breaking point came when he openly criticized me in front of the wedding planner. We were discussing catering options, and I suggested a few budget-friendly alternatives. Kyle scoffed and said, "Maybe some people are just cheap, but if you want a wedding that doesn't look like a high school prom, you'll need to spend more." I was taken aback. I've never been cheap with family events, and the comment felt personal. Emily tried to brush it off, saying he didn't mean it that way. Over the next few weeks, Kyle's behavior didn't improve. He started micromanaging every interaction I had with the wedding planning team, ignored my suggestions completely, and even started making snide comments about my career and life choices. One day, he outright told me, "You're just a guest contributing money. Your opinions don't matter here." That was the last straw. I decided to withdraw my financial contribution entirely. I sent Emily a long, heartfelt message explaining that I could not continue supporting the wedding if Kyle was going to treat me and my contributions with such disrespect. I also reminded her that a wedding is supposed to be a celebration of love and family, not a platform for someone to belittle others. I offered to help in non-financial ways, like assisting with planning certain aspects if she wanted, but I refused to give money. Emily reacted poorly. She called me hysterical, saying I was being selfish and trying to ruin her special day. She said that Kyle was under a lot of stress and that I should just deal with it for a few months. She also accused me of trying to control her wedding planning, which made me laugh bitterly because the only thing I ever tried to control was the unreasonable behavior of her fiancé. Family members have been divided. My parents support me to some extent. They've seen Kyle's behavior firsthand and agree that he's difficult. But my extended family and some mutual friends think I'm overreacting and should just pay up to avoid drama. Emily has essentially stopped talking to me except for angry texts and passive-aggressive social media posts. I feel like I'm justified, but I'm starting to second-guess myself because of the backlash. My reasoning is, I'm not saying she can't have a wedding. I'm not saying Kyle can't be involved. I'm saying I will not financially support something where I am treated with disrespect, and I also will not enable someone's controlling and condescending behavior. My contribution is entirely voluntary, and I believe it's reasonable to set boundaries, especially given how toxic the dynamic has become. On the other hand, I do understand that weddings can be stressful and that she might feel hurt that I'm pulling out financially. I just can't bring myself to overlook how Kyle has treated me. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend live with us temporarily, even though he's family now. This is going to be a long one, so bear with me. I, 28F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my fiancé, Mark, 30M, in a mid-sized city. I love my sister, Lisa, 26F, dearly, but we've always had a bit of a complicated dynamic. We're close, but our personalities clash, and we've had some blow-ups in the past over pretty small things. Anyway, Lisa has been dating her boyfriend, Greg, 27M, for a little over a year, and things seem serious. Greg moved around a lot for work, so he never really had a stable place. I met him a few times, and he seems nice enough, but he could be a little overbearing and loud. Nothing dangerous, just very intense. About 3 weeks ago, Lisa called me out of the blue, panicking. Greg's apartment situation had suddenly fallen through, and he was apparently going to be homeless for a week or two until he could find something new. Lisa asked me if he could stay with me for a couple of weeks, just until he got back on his feet. She framed it like this was urgent, and that I was the only person who could help. At first, I hesitated because my apartment is small, we already have a lot going on, and Mark and I have routines that we really value. But Lisa kept insisting and guilt-tripping me, saying, "He's basically family now. You'd be doing the right thing." I try to explain that it's not that simple. I don't dislike Greg, but having someone new move in, even temporarily, would completely disrupt our home life. After an hour of back and forth, I told her I would think about it, but honestly, I wasn't thrilled about the idea. Mark and I talked about it that night, and he was firmly against it. He pointed out that Greg has a loud, boisterous personality, he snores, and we barely have space as it is. Mark also reminded me that I have my work stress. I like having weekends where we just do nothing, and suddenly adding a guest into the mix would be exhausting. I agreed with him, but I didn't want to upset my sister, so I tried to soften the rejection. I told Lisa, "I wish I could help, but I don't think we can realistically host him right now. I hope you understand." Lisa flipped out. She immediately started texting me nonstop, saying things like, "Wow, I can't believe you'd refuse someone who's practically family, and I thought you cared about me." I didn't respond right away because I was busy with work, and then she called Mark to yell at him too. According to him, she said that he was being controlling and not supportive of family. Mark and I were both stunned. I tried to call Lisa the next day to explain, but she refused to pick up and kept sending me guilt-laden texts, each one more manipulative than the last. The situation escalated when Lisa started posting subtle things on social media, implying that we're selfish and don't care about our family. I didn't want to engage publicly, so I kept my distance. However, I started getting messages from mutual friends asking why I wouldn't help Greg, which made me second-guess myself a little. Some of my friends said, "He's only going to be there a week. Can't you just be nice?" Others said I was right to prioritize my own space. I explained to them my living situation and how tight our apartment is, but I still felt a little guilty. About a week later, Greg found another place, thankfully, and moved out. But Lisa's attitude didn't improve. She's been giving me the silent treatment and posting passive-aggressive things on social media about people who can't help their loved ones when they need it most. Our mutual friends have been commenting and sending me messages, some supportive, some critical. Mark has been great through all of this. He reminds me that our home and mental health come first, and that Lisa was being manipulative. I agree, but I can't shake the feeling that maybe I overreacted or that I'm being selfish. Greg really isn't a bad guy. He just would have been a difficult guest, and our apartment isn't built for guests. I know Lisa is disappointed, but now I'm worried that I might have permanently damaged our relationship. Every time I try to reach out, she ignores me or gets defensive. I've tried explaining that it was nothing personal and that it's just about space and logistics, but she refuses to accept it. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend live with us temporarily, even though Lisa insists he's family now. I don't want to be the villain, but I also don't feel like I did anything wrong. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss new uploads. And feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean the world to me. See you in the next video.